Hi, I'm Bruce Burke. Welcome to the Bullet Point Bulletins weekly wrap-up show. Our show is being powered by Plato Data Intelligence, private, secure, trusted Web3 data intelligence. For more news and information, please visit platodata.ai. And I'm here with my friend and co-host Tedd Huff of Fintech Confidential. Ted, please tell our audience what we're going to be discussing on the show today.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for having me on again, man. So this week, we're going to be going over a handful of items. The first one we're going to hit on is going to be the Reserve Bank of India continues to move forward with their retail CBDC pilot. We'll dive into that. We're also going to dive into a couple other things. So we have JP Morgan. We'll be talking about their Onyx digital assets and what they've done. Onyx Digital Assets Network and what they're doing with that. We'll also talk about a trademark that JP Morgan just received. Then we're going to dive into Binance and talk about how CZ's working to build out a multi-billion-dollar recovery fund. Then we'll dive in, lastly but not least, we'll talk about hardware wallets. We talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it again this week and just really dive into those things. So Bruce, let's hit off on the first topic of the Reserve Bank of India getting ready to launch their retail CBDC program.
I was invigorated about this, but the further I dug into it, man, does it feel like it seems like they have a lot of people involved in the rollout of this, and I understand it takes a lot of different companies doing a lot of different things, but there's a lot of people involved in this at a lot of different ways. And is that a regional thing, or why is there so much involved in this?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The CBDC program is being hosted by the National Payments Corporation of India, which is a public company in India. And it's being managed similarly to the UPI, or Unified Payments Interface, that they built out for the mobile payment platform program a number of years ago. And I was very lucky to be part of the Universal ID program back years and years ago when they tied it in with Visa and a handful of other products. And so what ended up happening when I had that program is that they were also they're very inclusive. They want everybody to participate in it. So they try and get as many banks to be involved. And because they have numerous banks, they really go out to it. Like when we did the Universal ID program with payment, it was really focused on ICICI Bank for the initial launch. And I think they learned that by doing that, they didn't get a whole lot of reach initially until they brought on the other banks. And this program is really focused in on the retail side of it. And if you look at the wholesale side that they launched back in November, nothing's been published about that yet, but you would have to assume that if they're making an announcement that everything's on track for the retail program, that the wholesale side of the house has been going pretty well.
It has to make sense. They wouldn't be instituting something for the general public, and essentially they're doing it where they're doing the banks have to integrate with some local payment companies. Think like almost like a Cash App kind of a thing. I'm guessing, right? Yeah. Like a bank. They call it Bankit, and the other one was Pay Near Me, and I think of Pay. It's called Pay Nearby, and we got Pay Near Me here in the U.S. Right? That's at all the 7-Elevens, right? So I found it very similar to payment products that are here in the U.S. It seems like they're very similar in flavor. You know what I mean? But it seems like there's a lot of moving pieces in this. And I guess it's because there's a lot of moving people and a lot of, regions and regional banks. And, India is a big, big, big continent. You know what I mean? So, this is not something that is going to be easy to roll out in all areas, to all banks, to all people very, very quickly,
So it's really interesting. The way that they're coming about this is they're launching a digital app, digital wallet that the consumers and the merchants both have to download the special wallet. so they can use the CBDC. They haven't really talked about how they're going to convert the traditional fiat into the CBDC, or if it's a one-to-one. If you have the rupee in your bank account that it's going to transfer, you can just, it immediately burns the CBDC token. And like, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion around that. So it'd be really fun to find out how they're doing that. One of the key things that they did say is that this isn't meant to replace the existing payment infrastructure. This is meant to enhance and supplement the existing structure, which is a very smart way to approach it. And honestly, the retail CBDC is I struggle with seeing it being done, especially in a really developed country that has a strong banking infrastructure. I think they're really just trying to feel it out. And I'm curious, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how well it goes in India. But again, India is a closed ecosystem, right? So you can't, you can repatriate funds back into the country, but you can't send money from India outside to other regions of the world. So it's a really interesting way, and maybe it's going to be a way for them to speed up and maybe do some cross-border and keep track of funds that have been sent outside of the country. So I don't know. I think the tracking side of it is going to be really fun to watch with this.
Yeah, with the with both the merchant and the consumer having an app that they have to interact through or transact through, right? It's not going to be integrated into POS. It's not going to be integrated into existing systems. It's going to be on a standalone mobile phone, is what it sounds like, right? And how is that going to integrate back with the merchant's, bank account? How is that going to work? It could happen on the back end, but it can't happen on the front end if it's on a separate thing, on a separate app on a mobile phone. So it's, and then, you're with M-Pesa, you're talking about people putting shillings in and they become, M-Pesa tokens or cash or whatever, right? But you can essentially do that right at a merchant. You can walk up to a place and fund your account at almost any retail store, right? And I'm not so sure that that's going to be the same way it is in India. And if you're talking about a central bank digital currency versus an M-Pesa, which was pretty much just a text program, right? It was everybody had a number and it was a text-based interface, and it was very simplified. Where I can't see that happening with a central bank digital currency application that both a merchant and a consumer would have to download. I would think it would be something a little bit more than what M-Pesa designed for Africa, Yeah,
and this is very similar to what a lot of the developed countries have done for like your primary coins in crypto. So your Bitcoin and ETH and all that stuff, to be able to purchase at a merchant's location. It's very similar, where you have to have that matching wallet to be able to make that happen, or you have to have an exchange that manages that. And so that's one of the reasons why I think the retail CBDC is really will struggle in this area. And when you compare it to M-Pesa is a digital bank. If you really look at it, they're a digital first financial institution that just happens to have a text-based interface. Whereas what we're talking about here is we're having a separate interface that connects all of the financial institutions together in an exchange protocol. So it's like you have all the multiple layers on top of it, which, without knowing more details, and this is where we're going to have to learn more about how it's actually working, it just feels like it's just a digitized version of bank-to-bank transfer that has all the same latency problems in place for actually moving. So without knowing more details about it, it's really hard to understand how well this will be received within the community.
It said in the article that it's going to be rolled out around December. So we'll have to keep a watch on that and stay in tune with that. Like you said, the devil is in the details, and the the details can make or break that program. As far as the sentiment I know India is very strong, in IT, and it's a huge part of the industry there, right? Is the sentiment right for a digital rupee? Are the people interested?
It depends on who you are. And I hate to use that. It depends on who you are and where you're at in the class system to really how much this is going to make a big impact for you. And we will only see how well this takes off. I think you're going to see it match up very closely, like I mentioned earlier, the UPI program. So the people that are using the UPI and they use it frequently, if they use that, I think you're going to see a lot of the same people use the CBDC. But also keep in mind, this may be the way for the government to distribute funds to individuals as well and track where it gets used and how it gets used. But there's so many things that can go along with that, again, we're only really going to know once it gets rolled out. And they are targeting a December release. They didn't give a date in December. So my feeling is it's going to be very, very late in December. If it
July of next
happen.
year, are you thinking?
Maybe we'll see what happens.
Do you think they're going to try and encourage downloading of the wallet by, funding the first $35 like they did? What was that, El Salvador, where they're doing the Bitcoin, and they were the El Chivo wallet. They were trying to bring adoption through giving them the first wall up.
Yeah, I think it's different, right? So El Salvador is trying to prop up their currency. And to bring money into the country. Whereas India, I think they're just trying to figure out how to digitize and get further into a era of digital finance. They've done really, really well in a number of different areas, but it's a totally different use case, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. I think it's I don't think, however it comes out in the first iteration is never how it ends up anyway. You know what I mean? There's always, tweaks. There's always improvements. There's always, well, we were wrong about this, and this isn't really the way people, you got to let the users kind of drive how they want to do it. Like, when they first opened Twitter, they're like, here's our API, go invent a bunch of stuff. And the people want to invent a bunch of stuff. And Twitter brought it inside, right? And pretty much killed all them off,
Thank you for those great ideas. We're just going to go ahead and pick that up and bring it in-house. Yeah. Well, and the funny part is that everybody complains about the same thing. Amazon does the same thing. So if you look at Amazon Basics, most of the Amazon Basics are based off of their top-selling products in their marketplace. So they say, Allbirds, they ripped off Allbirds. And now if you search Allbirds, they got wool shoes come up, right? Like wool sneakers come up. If you type Allbirds in Amazon, I haven't done that, but I'll have to try it, man. So we've talked a lot about India. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this around the CBDCs. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it. I mean, Japan just launched theirs as well. So, and then in China launched theirs a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I think it may make sense for us maybe to on a side note, do like a stack ranking of how everybody's using it and how well it's going. So that might be something we pick up and bring back to everybody here in the next few weeks.
It seems to be a trend, and it seems to be a growing trend. It seems like every country in the world's doing it and interested in it, and it's a big topic.
I think they're all trying
discussion,
to figure it out. Yeah. So maybe that's a topic. Maybe we just come back and just do a CBDC episode, just kind of talk into that stuff. But I do want to move on into JP Morgan. Man, they've been busy this week in the news. We got two really cool stories. I'm going to start first with the DBS side of the house. And, what's really important that the DBS piece of this, the announcement that came out, is using the Onyx platform, which is their digital information, digital asset platform that they launched back in 2020. It's also leveraging the JPM coin, stable coin that was launched back in 2019. And it's really cool how they have figured out the types of programs within the financial institution that are benefiting the most from the blockchain. And I'd love, Bruce, for you to kind of give a background of how you see this played out with JP Morgan and DBS.
Well, way back when I went to Singapore, when I joined Twitter, 15 years ago?
A couple days ago.
Rob Finley, a contact that did Next Money and all that since, he was working at DBS in Singapore. I think he's moved on, and I think he's working for one of the big accounting firms now, PwC, I think. But he and Neil Cross were working with DBS right there in Singapore, and they were doing innovative stuff back then. I mean, that was the groundbreaking edge of it. That's when they just purchased when Visa purchased the Fundamo platform. That was how long ago that was, right? So that was the early days, the nascent days of mobile wallets and mobile banking and, all that sort of thing. So it's interesting that at this point they see blockchain and tokens and all that stuff more as a settlement tool and a back end tool than a front end tool for the consumers. Whereas, the big push in crypto is this is going to be our next currency. This is going to be, the way people interact. This is the way, you're going to buy things. This is the way you're going to trade stuff with friends. And the banks are like, no, we're going to use this on our back end. You're not going to ever see this stuff, and you don't need to see it, Yeah, so it seems like they have a complete different viewpoint and perspective and use case on it than everybody else in the marketplace.
Well, so I think one of the big things to keep in mind is that right now the JPM coin is a private blockchain, but they have aspirations to bring that onto the public permissionless blockchains. So they're trying, I think this is them learning how it works, figuring out how to manage it, get all these different pieces in it, because currently it's a private blockchain behind a walled garden that is known as JPM, right? But they've also have other participants. They have Goldman Sachs, they have BNP Paribas, they obviously have DBS playing in there. And so they've got all these different things, and they're really they're figuring out how to play as a bank first blockchain company, right? And that's really what Onyx is really designed to be, as a bank first platform. Now, what that does is it's not decentralized, so we're centralized again. We have a lot of different pieces, but it is really interesting to see how they're leveraging the blockchain to manage all of these different pieces. DBS and JP Morgan also backed a company called Partier. I'm going to probably pronounce it wrong, which is a Singapore-based blockchain payments network that ties in a lot of the external pieces of it as well. So there's a lot of different things going in this. I mean, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, JP Morgan's participating in Project Guardian, which is the DeFi for financial institutions, and trying to figure all this stuff together. And there's a lot of movement in this space. But I think one of the items, my perception is that this is just them figuring out how to move large amounts of money, how to reduce the cost, how to speed up the transaction, because that is a world that they can control. And this is the interface piece.
And it's a lot more under their control, where you don't have the anomaly of a consumer walking into a bank and suddenly infusing, a large amount of cash or taking out a large amount of cash. This is pretty much day in, day out. A lot of the stuff that they're doing is stuff they've been doing forever, but that has taken forever because of inefficient systems, because of probably it's still a lot of paper-based transactions. Probably still a lot of human interaction, where at the end of the day, somebody's sitting down with a 10 key and and just cranking it off and totaling it up and looking for the penny and doing that stuff. And that's not really necessary anymore. And I think that they're really breathing a sigh of relief at the bank, that they're doing all this stuff. But I think this is going to, one, if they can do the repos back and forth that much quicker, it's going to allow them to make that much more money. I use the Singapore wealth fountain in that video on purpose, right? Because it's going to allow them to generate. They're talking about 300 billion already before DBS even got involved, right? So
so that's a big point. So with those partners I mentioned, since BNP Paribas joined in May, they've reached over $300 billion since December 2020, right? So in 2 years, $300 billion have flown through this. And if you look at it, and you mentioned it just a moment ago, this Onyx ecosystem is designed specifically for settling 24/7. And when you look at repos, like the length of time for a repo is about 1 day, but you have to plan for it 2 days in advance.
And then you have, and it's not 24/7 either. It's not working on the weekends. It's working on banking hours, banking days, and that's it. It's when the bank closes, repo closes. There's no more repo action going on.
And when you institute blockchain, it's 24/7. It is triggered on an event. It happens within minutes, if not seconds. So imagine right now the length of time normally is 1 day because there's a lot of manual effort going back and forth. Can you imagine a repo being, I get it, and I repay it back in like 30 seconds? Like it's like this, you start to see the flow of funds and the movement of funds really, really speeding up, which is going to be huge. But that's the settlement side of the house. And JP Morgan jumped into, like I mentioned earlier, they got the trademark approved for the word mark of JP Morgan Wallet. And the idea of this is, and that's just the name, right? So I want, it's really,
it's a bank account. It's a distributed ledger. It's not a decentralized ledger, but it's a distributed ledger.
So it's interesting. So the whole trademark, and it's fun to watch other people talk about their perceptions of what this means. And everybody's got all these different ideas. But I want to make it super clear. As I read through all of the USPTO documents and dove into it really deep, this trademark is not a technology trademark. It is not a process patent. It is not anything like that. This is purely to protect the name of JP Morgan Wallet. Now, what this does,
it's a word mark, like you said. It's not even a brand mark; it's a word mark. If you go to the website, which is in the video that I did, right, and I pulled it up on mobile, right at the top, JP Morgan Wallet, TM in letters TM, right next to it, almost as big as JP Morgan Wallet, and very proudly displayed, and very, very in your face kind of a thing, and. From what I've been able to understand, they've done a lot of different things with it because talking about the processes now and not just the name and the word mark, because it's on a public blockchain and all that information is publicly visible and everything else, which has never been anything that JP Morgan's ever done. It's never visible to the public other than your final totals and your ledger, right? You got your ins and your outs, and that's it, right? You're not seeing what's going on behind the scenes. Unlike that, this is all out and all visible. And they said that they really they wanted to make sure because essentially this was their clients' information, and this was their clients' information visible on a public blockchain. And so and I totally understand, they have to make sure that, their client is protected and they're protected. And, we're talking about money here. And if it's public, and people have access, let's make sure that's locked down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason to do the tokenization. That's the whole reason to do obfuscated. wallet addresses that you and I may have our own JP Morgan wallet, but externally it's wallet 1234. Right. And so those are the types of things that are going to play. So I want to come back to the trademark piece of it. They applied for it on July 24th of 2020, and they went through numerous cycles where the USPTO rejected it. They they came back and they said, no. We really believe that this is for us. And then went back and forth, and they only got issued the trademark in November 15th of 2022. And that was because they were able to show what is called prior art going back before the date that they applied for it, that they'd actually used that. And it had to be decided close enough. And if you remember, the JP coin was in 2019, right? So
right.
in documentation, they were able to show that they used the word mark of JP Morgan wallet in that piece of it. So they were able to get through and get it. I think one of the things that is super important about this is showing JP Morgan's dedication to interoperability between DeFi and TradFi and really moving that forward. And honestly, this could be, and I can't I can't validate this, right? But this could be the first wallet that a bank has offered on the public blockchain.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that other people have done it and just haven't announced it, because they may have. But this looks to be the very first wallet that is connected to the public blockchain.
It was referred to as a subledger in some of it. So it's a subledger of a bigger master ledger, right? Which is JPM as a whole, I'm guessing, right? So everybody's got their own little subledger, and that's what it is. It's just ledger technology and on a public blockchain. But it's how is it protected, right? So in looking at this whole thing, it's like you wonder, is JP Morgan actually going to issue a physical wallet, right? Or are they going to do a cold wallet? Or are they going to do a hardware wallet? Are they, or is this just, like you said, they're pushing the idea because of the prior stuff, like at the Pay Show, we had Ron Karpovic. I invited him to come speak as the keynote speaker, because he was the guy that was going on Squawk Box, and he was the guy that was talking up the JPM coin and all that. I was so busy with the show that I didn't hardly even get a chance to hear his presentation or get a chance to actually talk with him, which I would have loved to do, because I'm sure he's very knowledgeable about the stuff. He was a very, very astute gentleman, right? But that was what was interested. That is what interested me, was he was essentially the spokesperson for JPM coin, and I knew that they were really making movement into that space, and so this was kind of startling that they've been doing a lot, but at the same time, Jamie Dimon's like, that Bitcoin stuff, you guys, and I've had so much of this stuff, and it's junk, and I'm over it, and so I think the big difference is that you're looking at the JPM coin, which is a stable coin, versus a Bitcoin, which is a speculative digital piece. It's going to go down a little bit more before it rebounds. It will rebound. I am confident that it will. But you look at this whole piece with the JPM coin, and you look at all these different pieces you have in this place, and really, I hate to say this, but they're trying to centralize cryptocurrency inside of the bank. And you look at it, banks have the same problem with liquidity as FTX had. If you look at the bank, and if you were asked the bank to pay out all the money that are on their books to all the people that have money in there as deposits at the exact same time, we would see the exact same issue that we had with FTX. And I think what we're seeing is that the banks are trying to become a centralized exchange.
for all of the digital assets, not just their stable coin, but all digital assets. And Onyx really starts to dive into that piece of it. But we run into this piece as they're trying to centralize it again. And that's really cool. But that would be really good for a retail investor. That would be really good for someone who's already a customer of the bank. And it kind of simplifies a lot of this stuff, but it removes a lot of the decentralization. And I'm going to say it again, if it's not your keys, it's not your token. And that's really what starts to come into this piece of it, which has got me I'm going to skip ahead, man.
Yeah, sure.
Like Binance decided that they were going to invest in yet another hardware wallet. Now, this isn't the first one. And one of the things that, as we're backing out of the piece that we talked about, JP Morgan and a centralized exchange and holding tokens and holding all these assets.
Conversely, we have self-custody.
Right. So we have self-custody. And really what starts to come into mind, and what's even funnier about this is that are centralized exchanges even necessary? Do we need to centralize?
I've always said they're the weakest link in the equation, right? And you want to talk about centralizing something that was supposed to be decentralized. I mean, the exchanges did that, right? I mean, it was the very nature of the business, and I don't know why everybody took to them so quickly and started thinking of them as banks. I guess a lot of them, did staking protocols and that kind of stuff, and that kind of led to that. But in my mind, if I'm holding an asset, I want to hold the asset, right? I just found it really weird, and when I posted last week's episode from the weekly wrap up, I said that it was weird that we kind of went off in a little Bitcoin, a little token wallet tangent for 5 or 10 minutes, and then the next day, Binance announced that they were going to throw this money into this Ngrave. Looking into the Ngrave, it's really, really interesting. There's a lot of different pieces to it, and some of the concepts that they're using for security is pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. So, I look at the whole piece of it, and this is kind of where my mind starts to laugh, or I start to laugh a little bit, is I look at how this would impact like traditional finance as well. So we start talking about these hardware wallets where we're putting the money on the hardware wallets. Why couldn't we do that with dollars, right? So
yeah. I asked a question a while back, and I think we've talked about it before in the session. I think Ted wanted to go fix his dog there. I think his dog was taking over the conversation. But we talked previously about the idea of this, and I think why Binance is moving in this direction now is that people are losing kind of faith in the exchanges. Yeah. His whole concept of, don't buy the dip. That's what you're going to say. That's what you should say at this point. Right.
Right.
But at that same time, him saying, hey, don't do this, be safe, don't do this. He's raising FOMO like crazy, right? And people are going to be like, oh, no, I'm competent, right? I can do this, right? And so, and I don't want to miss this dip, right? And, this may be the lowest dip ever, right? And let's buy now, a lot of it, I think that he's saying it's because he should be saying that at this time.
Yeah, and I'm going to dive a little bit more into that when we start to talk about the recovery fund. But, looking at the hardware wallet, their first endeavor in this was when SafePal dove into the Binance incubation program way back in 2018. I can't believe I'm saying way back, and we're talking like 4 years, right? 5 years. Sorry, I can't count today. So we were talking like 5 years ago, and we've got all these different things coming into play. Then now SafePal, just by the way, is focused on traders who want to maintain self-custody with a simplified experience. It's a device with a screen and a touchpad. Starts around $59, and it's about the size of a credit card. And on top of that, it's an air-gapped wallet as well, which means that it doesn't directly connect to the internet. And in order for you to get access to that or to be able to move stuff around, you have to go through a recognition protocol and a whole bunch of multi-factor authentications that have to come into play, right? So that comes into play. And this latest investment into Ngrave, which is a Belgian company, it is a cold storage wallet. So it's not meant for it's not meant for trading. It's meant to put a place to put your digital assets. It has a fairly narrow support around coins and other things. But I think this is where Binance is really going to help them out. And that one is 398 euros or 415 US dollars. But the security protocol on that is much more stringent than what is on SafePal. And it's a lot more difficult to get access to it. So I like you mentioned, I think what they're doing is they're saying, we need people to take self-custody of this. And if we can give them the interface that is similar to the centralized, and I think that's the big piece that you mentioned. Why do people flock to these centralized solutions? It's because the centralized solution was able to give you that amazing customer experience without having to really drive through it and not have to figure it out. Because honestly, up until the last year or two, hardware wallets were really hard. And if you go to any of the websites for SafePal or Ngrave, they always do a bundle where you can get a metal seed phrase item.
That's crazy. I was watching the video and watching how they did that and how they have a back plate essentially, right? You have a plate in the back and then you have a plate in the front, and each plate in the front has a unique identifier that the company attributes to the owner when you register your warranty, I guess. And
you register your wallet. You register your hardware wallet.
And you're essentially going in with a punch tool and you're punching your seed phrase into a sheet of stainless steel, essentially. And then you're separating the two, where your whole sheet with your numbers on the front and your punch sheet that's been punched is put in another place. And so you want that seed phrase again. You don't have to remember it, and you can just store one in one place and one in the other, or both together, or stick them under the mattress, or whatever you want to do. It's much deeper than that, and it's much deeper than what I've seen, and it's unique. But CZ was talking about making this like so easy. 99% of the population could do it. And I don't think the graphing aspect of this is going to speak to that audience. I just don't think that. I think they need iPhone experience, right? They need something that simple. They need a very simple interface.
Well, and I think that's really what Ngrave and SafePal really bring to it, right? Is that you still have your seed phrase, and there's like so many different ways. But if you were to buy like a Trezor or something like that, they come with a paper one, right? Where you can write your seed phrase down on paper, but paper isn't resistant to fire.
No, right? It's not.
and a stainless steel card is more resistant to fire, probably one of the most resistant to fire, right? And so you look at that different route, and if you're doing a paper card, I think about like I have a safety deposit box. So I'm going to take that paper card, I'm going to put it in the bank safety deposit box, which is fireproofed and blah, 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 right? Or do I put it in a safe that is fireproof in my house? It's like all these different things you start to think about, right? But that is super important to have that seed phrase completely separated, not be accessible from the internet, make it completely hard-based. But not only they're the cards you talked about where you literally punch it in, but you've also got the ones where you get like all the alphabet and you slide the little metal letters into this little grid. And then you've also got one that's is like a little pill bottle that's a vertical one where you stack the letters of the phrase in there. And there are so many different types that are out there. And depending on your style and kind of how you want to do it, you'll find the right one for you. But other hardware wallets that are out in the marketplace, I'm just going to hit on a few. I mentioned Trezor. They have a Model 1 and a Model T. And all these range anywhere from like $59 on up, as I mentioned last week. You've got Ledger, which is the Keep Key Classic. You've got Keep Key Classic, which is by Shapeshift. You've got the Ledger Nano S Plus.
Something like the latest Galaxy phones coming out of Samsung or something, right?
And one of my
do you think they'll ever make crypto simple enough where grandma can do it?
That's what the centralized services are really for. I mean, seriously, if you go to lowest common denominator, you're going to need centralization. I think that's where JPM is really picking up a lot of the stuff. You're going to hear a lot more financial institutions, very large financial institutions, really talk about how they're bringing these things in-house because they're all starting to get really close to having figured out how to support it. I've had conversations with other major banks. I'll just put it this way. Those banks that are part of the Zelle network are all talking about this. They're all figuring out how to work this in. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see Zelle taking that next step as being that digital currency, digital asset wallet and transfer protocol in the near future.
You think that's why all the banks gravitated to Zelle so quickly and adopted it so quickly and it became what it was because of their support?
Oh, definitely. I think without the bank support around Zelle and without having the major banks as the shareholders of that and early warning, which is a subsidiary, Zelle is a subsidiary of, without that, it would not have gotten the traction that it got. It would not have been able to pick it up. And they made it so simple for these financial institutions to bring it on because they didn't say, hey, bank, you have to do this all on your own. They went out and they used the partners like FIS and Fiserv and Jack Henry. And I mean, I could name a whole bunch of them, right? That really allowed them to say, hey, we're going to work with these banking softwares, these main system core systems to enable Zelle into the system so that we can definitely take care of this.
Yeah. It seems like, each one of the banks are, looking at the central bank digital currency. Now JPM's looking at the back end, right, and how they can support the back end. And then, with Zelle on the front end, it's just a matter of time before all this is 100% digitized. And it's, a dollar could start out as a digital dollar and never see the light of day as a physical dollar, and maintain itself as a digital dollar its entire lifetime, its entire lifespan.
Yeah, and so that's what's I think you're going to see the stablecoin realm just explode. I don't know any other way to explain it, but I think that's going to be the stablecoin is where it's going to get really, really exciting. You're going to see the USDT. You're going to see a whole bunch of them really explode, and then you'll see it kind of contract back into more of a linear pattern. But that is a big place that is really going to start kicking in.
When, as far as like prophecy, right? When do you, I have my date in my head. Like when do you see that the average consumer will be interacting, with their subledger, right, rather than their checkbook, and using digital assets, whether it's a digital dollar or a central bank digital currency or a Bitcoin or a Dogecoin or whatever. Wouldn't it be funny if a Dogecoin became the U.S. currency? But what year do you see this?
Well, so this may surprise you. You're doing it today. You just don't realize it.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is the key, is this will continue to grow and you won't realize that you're interacting at that level until way later, until somebody tells you. And I think that is the big thing that everybody is working towards. That is a primary reason for the JP Morgan wallet. That's all these different things, is they're really working on making the interface so seamless that it becomes the plumbing of the house. It becomes the electrical wiring of the house.
If you think about the water that's running through the pipes, the water is 0 through 9. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then it's just a matter of what symbol you put in front of it, right? And as long as the consumer sees, the S with the line through it, they're going to suspect USD, and what it actually is on the back end, does it really matter? It's a unit of one, and that's it. And that's all you need to know. And if you got 100 of them, you got 100 unit, right? And that's it. That's the way it works. So I don't, like you said, nothing really has to change that much for the consumer.
It's going to feel like, I hate to say this, it's going to feel like Zelle, Venmo, and Cash App. That's what it's going to feel like. And
I see where, the funny thing was that, like Zelle and Cash App kind of like came out at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. But Zelle got that adoption, right? And the banks all adopted it and everything else. And I was like, why aren't they doing that with Cash App? And the answer now is very obvious, right? One, they don't like Jack Dorsey. No, but
but also you have to look at it this way: is there are different demographics, right? So Zelle is typically an older demographic, a demographic that has trust in the bank ecosystem and trust in the legacy platforms. Whereas Cash App is, I don't trust banks. I don't trust, but I trust in my fellow people in my community. And that's a big difference between the two that a lot of people don't seem to think about, is that is a huge piece. It's a demographic, and it's who's the centralized unit that they trust the most. And I just had this conversation with another gentleman about his platform, which is a visual shopping type program that allows you to purchase in video. And we were talking about how if you look at Instagram or you look at the social media channels, everybody tried to adopt the visual or the social commerce side of the house.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is people felt like, well, I don't really trust the social network with my payment information because I don't trust that the things that they're showing me is real. And the brands that I'm seeing, am I really going to get the product that I look for? So you have 3 areas of potential failure where trust has not been built. And if you are controlling the delivery mechanism and you're providing an ability to connect a community, then that trust is enabled, no matter what product or service is being sold. And
I just read an article this morning before the show here about how TikTok, ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, is working really hard with a lot of partners in Asia, not U.S. partners, but in Asia, to really make that e-commerce experience for a TikTok user, to discover a product and be able to purchase it and get the product you're purchasing and, feel secure in your purchase and get that delivery information and all that stuff that you would get with a merchant you trusted, right? All those, they want to make that, they think that that is the future of e-commerce, that video of products, or discovery of products through video. Which, if you want to think about it, YouTube is just one big commercial. It's like, oh, I want to get through this commercial roll to get to the episode, which is full of commercials.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was watching a show the other day that was talking about how at one point, and I felt it myself, I had to be forced through 10 full commercials before I could watch another video. And the last commercial, you're going to laugh, the last commercial that I had in that 10 was prompting me to sign up for YouTube Premium. So I didn't see commercials.
Of course.
But that's kind of goes into it. And it's interesting you mentioned ByteDance doing that outside, because they've actually pulled back a lot in the US on the social shopping. And, these are some of the things that are also being talked about with Twitter, and how they're going to turn that into a shopping mechanism with the whole payments play that Elon has talked about. So it's going to be really interesting seeing a lot of these different things.
Well, he's going to put out his own phone now too, Ted. You got to buy the Twitter phone. You got to buy the Elon.
Oh my gosh. I'm not even going to go into that today. But what I am going to go into is the fund, Binance Recovery Fund, which the timing is just impeccable. So one of the things that came up is CZ is becoming like this white knight for DeFi. And
I worry about that. I worry about that because previous to that, SBF was the white knight. And are we just getting a new one? And, I'm sure you've heard the rumors just like I have. Go over there and slap that camera one more time. There you go. Smack that thing around a little bit.
Just give me a second here.
Yeah. I would be a little more concerned about jumping into and saying that there is a new white knight in town. There he is.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just going to kind of go like this. So here's why it bothers me, right? Is we've seen everything that happened with FTX. We saw how much CZ played a huge role in that, whether it was intentional or unintentionally, played a huge role. And now what he's starting to do is during this recovery fund, he sneaks these little comments in, like these little jabs at SBF, because now he's saying, well, SBF influenced the November report of Reuters that indicated that they had avoided U.S. sanctions, had helped companies avoid U.S. sanctions using the Binance network for funding or sending money in and out of Iran, right? So,
right, yeah.
You're like, okay, so now it just makes me question, like, dude, how much of this is just retribution for some of these things, and then some of the aspects that he's taking by talking to the legislators and all these different guys about building out a stronger standards, building out all these different things. How much of that is just because he got pissed off at SBF?
Well,
and that's one of the things.
And you have to understand this $1 billion recovery fund is in Binance tokens. These are not, this is not US dollars, right? This is Binance tokens. So,
yes,
putting up $1 billion of your tokens is essentially putting up $1 billion worth of air, if there's a bank run on Binance, right? I mean,
Well, and you bringing that up, another good thing to understand with that piece too, is that other founders of other tokens, I'm not going to name them, but they have also said the same thing. It's like, dude, that's really cool. You're trying to be the white knight and coming with this $1 billion fund, but show me the cash that backs it up. Show me that these reserves that you say you have, they don't mean anything. So you're talking about all these different things, and none of this means anything.
Well, and then the other companies that are contributing, he's getting other companies to contribute to the fund, and he's saying, "I'll take cash, I'll take tokens, I'll take debt." I'll take debt, with you essentially giving me an IOU, right? So, I mean, how do you bring somebody out of drowning in debt with more debt?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So a lot of it is appearance. A lot of it is, it's marketing, it's hype, it's a message in the channel, it's all that. I saw an interview when he was in Indonesia, and it was his first interview since the collapse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was replying. The interviewer asked him about him and Sam sparring, and he's like, "That guy is crazy." He's like, "I wasn't sparring with him. I was, I'm way over here. I'm not sparring with him. Why is he calling me a sparring partner? That's a crazy guy."
Because SBF was not the only one in the background talking smack. That's what ends up happening. But I'm looking at this also as, like you mentioned, that they're bringing in other industry players to fund this fund. But he just continues to use the FTX saga as fuel to try and get people to jump on board. And that kind of goes into the white knight piece of it. I'm really curious what this really means for the crypto community. Are we in this new cycle of circle, and circle, and circle?
It goes back to, Ted, it comes back to what I've been saying all along. Everybody was playing with the same $1 billion and saying that it was theirs. And there was only $1 billion in the center, and everybody had a hand on it saying, that's my $1 billion. And when somebody spent that $1 billion, wherever they spent it, whether it was on a bank that's 9 by 12 in Farmington, or whether it's, wherever, he's trying to get a banking license. That's why he bought that damn thing, right? He's trying to he's moving into wanting to have a banking license. So he, invested heavily, but it just seems like House of Cards, like for real. I mean, for real. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so that bank you're talking about, I'm relatively familiar with the bank. There are other things that are going on there. FTX was really, really aggressive in a number of different areas, just trying to move things forward. And I know that everybody calls it a fraud and everybody calls it all these different things, but if you were to look at Lehman Brothers, if you were to look at any of the banks that have gone under, that have collapsed, if you look at any of those and you look at the reasons behind it, you're going to draw a lot of parallels behind it. Now, mind you, were they mismanaged FTX? I believe so. But I think if you look at any mismanaged financial institution, and I know FTX wasn't meant to be a financial institution, but if you look at any financial institution that was just mismanaged, that ended up going bankrupt, that ended up losing everything, you're going to find a lot of similarities. So I think this is not a failure of the technology. This is a failure of individuals. It is a failure of process. And it also has a ton to do with people using their personal leverage to have specific outcomes. And that is the piece that kind of bothers me a little bit.
And I think it's also a failing of the industry, if there is such a thing in crypto, right? You have to understand that in other industries, like say you're a mobile carrier, right? You get the GSMA, right? Or CTIA here in USA, right? If you're an electronics manufacturer, you got the CES, right? And plenty of others, right? There's IFA and all the other ones all around the world, right? In crypto, there was a few associations that sprang up, but not really. There was not much in the way of groups of companies that were an association that were helping to form the industry, right? And give it some underpinnings and a chassis and some basic standards and practices.
Well, and I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's meant to be distributed. It's meant to be zero knowledge. It's meant to be where you don't need those things. And I think the technology itself, if you look at the technology, I totally agree. I don't think you need an association around determining blockchain. I think the DAOs do a really good job of determining the functionality of the technology. Where I think that the support and the regulation and all these different things really come into play are places that become a centralized hub. So if you centralize this, if you are making conversions, if you are doing that, I think there needs to be that in that space, which is the thing that FTX was trying to accomplish. It's the thing that Coinbase is trying to accomplish. It's the thing that Binance is trying to accomplish. It's all of these different pieces that happen. And I think you're going to see, so there is a, oh my gosh, my brain's went blanking off. There is a group that does have the Central Blockchain Business Development Association, which is a global thing that's based out of Europe. And they do a lot of work in this space, and they spend a lot of time. And I got to talk to a handful of folks that are board members for that association through Cardano and a handful of other folks. And I think they are really driving blockchain in the business perspective of how to use it and how to look at it. But we're still missing the regulatory side of the house. And the big reason for the regulatory side of the house is that we've got different government agencies that are fighting over who gets to take the baby home, and they're trying to figure out how to split the baby in half. Yep. And no one has decided to determine what the rules are to determine what it really is and how that affects everybody else. And so there's a lot of pieces that start to apply into that, which is going to make it really hard to manage in the ecosystem. So yeah, man, we've hit on so many different things, and we could probably talk about these things for days. One thing that I wanted to bring up that looks like a good opportunity for the recovery fund might be BlockFi, because right now they're going through bankruptcy preparations. Yeah. And Binance has not made any public comment about this, but BlockFi has said they're looking towards that fund to help them out during this bankruptcy program. So we'll see what ends up happening.
They were really doing okay until this. I think they got involved in the 3 Arrows Capital and the Genesis that whole collapse. And BlockFi was actually doing a pretty good job from what I understood. And it was just an asset thing, very much, like what everybody else is experiencing.
The liquidity crunch. I know everybody keeps talking about this, but anytime you have somebody do a run on something like this, you're going to be in a liquidity crunch. And what's funny is
if you did a run on Binance today, he's going to have the same problem that FTX had.
Guess what? If you do a run on any company that has assets that they've leveraged to generate additional revenue, this is going to happen. Yeah. It's not just crypto. And I think that's the biggest piece I'm trying to communicate to everybody, is that Lehman Brothers had the same issue. They did the exact same thing. They had a run on them that put them in a liquidity crunch that then decided to bring them down. We almost had that happen in 2008, but the government bailed out the banks. Yeah. And what we're seeing right now is that the government, because they don't understand it and they haven't defined the rules around it, they haven't done all of these different things. There's no way for them to bail out these companies because they don't understand it well enough.
They have no clue what's out there, who's exposed, where it went, anything else. And that's going to be my final
But that's easily solved. That's easily solved with software companies like Chainalysis. If you want to know where all this shit's at, all you got to do is leverage a technology like that, because again, this is public. This information is the public domain. Every last movement of every fractional piece of all of these currencies are on the public chain.
So that brings me to my question, which we can use to wrap up the episode. Where is all this cash that all these investors put into all these exchanges? Because none of them have any money anymore. where did they spend it? Were they Learjetting and yachting around? I mean, Sam's got a pretty nice establishment there, but it's nowhere near what the kind of money he brought in, So where is the actual cash? Where did that all go?
That is the billion-dollar question, is to where did it all go? And I will just say this, and I think what you've seen happen is there are a number of coins that have been pumped and dumped using all of this. And it takes me back to Jordan Belfort and the Wolf of Wall Street with all of the penny stocks and all that fun stuff. And I think you saw a lot of that happen. So what ended up happening is they took the cash in, they used it to buy other pieces, got it pumped, then dumped it, and then brought it back in. And if you look at all these investors, they did not invest in Bitcoin. They didn't buy ETH. They didn't buy that. Let's use FTX. They bought the FTT token. At Binance, when they invest in Binance, they're buying the Binance token. This is just a creative way around the whole ICO type stuff that we talked about and we'd seen early on. And I think the big piece is getting the understanding, and this is where you're going to laugh at me, if they used the CBDC in this whole thing, you would be able to see where everything went.
That's
which
true.
is also the scary part about this, is that if you're using CBDC, you get to see everything that happened. So what I'm going to say to your question is nobody knows where the money really went. Everything that I just mentioned is a complete fabrication in my mind. And at no point does this constitute as financial advice or suggestions on how to invest your monies. I am definitely not the person to follow on that. I've lost so much in the crypto world. But
I am not the person to ask for financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. I'm merely a person who's interested in the technology surrounding financial services. It's very engaging. It's changing on a daily basis, and it's starting to be like a bag that they're drawing the string on, right? They're starting to close it all up, and they're starting to actually do and implement the things that we were talking about 20 years ago when we first met each other.
Yeah.
10 years
It's
ago,
crazy.
2010, when we first met each other, they're now starting to do all those things that we wanted them to do way back then.
Yeah.
Even before crypto. I mean, it was around a little bit then, but
I would say blockchain technology has accelerated so much that a lot of people don't realize. It has accelerated a ton of things, especially around data, around security, around identity, around control of assets, and it's only going to get more and more. So the way I like to position it is take the time to learn blockchain. Don't worry about the cryptos. Don't worry about the instruments that are being used with the blockchain. Learn how the blockchain works. Get a really good understanding of that, because that will help you understand all these different things that are going on. And it's going to be a big deal, big deal. So take the time to learn about it. There are a ton of resources out there. And heck, Bruce, we may have to just do like a blockchain 101 and bring maybe some folks in and kind of talk around it.
That's a good idea. In my mind, over artificial intelligence, over any number of other technologies that are the hot new technologies, blockchain is more of a enduring technology because it's the underlying infrastructure, and it's not just some frosting on top and some features and some capabilities. It's essentially the groundwork, right? The framework and the standardization of financial services, and it's
not just financial services though. But that's the whole thing. Is it's not just financial
hard to implement,
services.
really.
So with that, you're not only having financial services, and if you look at blockchain as being the layer 1 or the layer 0, actually, and then you build your layer 1 on top of it, which is It could be financial services. It could be asset management. It could be information exchange. It could be identity services. Like it could be so many different things. And that's kind of where we talked about a few weeks ago with Jack Dorsey and his new blockchain-based social network functions that he's working with. It's completely outside of that. But that layer 0 of being blockchain is going to be the next level. And that when people talk about Web3, that's really what they're talking about, is that lower 0 level layer that really is getting us into the distributed and zero trust network functionality of decentralized. So that's where I'm at, man. Hey, so I'm going to move on just real quick and just say thanks again, man, for having me on. If everybody wants to learn more about Fintech Confidential, be sure to look us up everywhere at Fintech Confidential. If you want to listen to the podcast, go to podcast.fintechconfidential. If you want to see what we got going on in YouTube, we got youtube.fintechconfidential. And if you want to be notified of our newsletters, anything new that we got going on, go to access.fintechconfidential.com so you can get access to Fintech Confidential information. And Bruce, thanks again for having me on. Let's hear some more about Plato Data and Bullet Point Bulletins.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for watching. Please don't forget to like, to follow, subscribe, share all the things that you usually do on social media. My personal YouTube handle is at Bruce Burke, my name. And I'm Bruce Q Burke on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Blah, 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 blah. If you need any short form video for your organization, similar to Bullet Point Bulletins, we're experts in putting out and crafting short form stories and brand stories. So please feel free to reach out to me on those things. And thanks again, once again, to our company that powers our show. That's Plato Data Intelligence. It's private, secure, trusted Web3 data intelligence. Yes, they have a blockchain laying underneath it all, that level 0, Plato Data Intelligence. You can learn more and you can sign up today at platodata.ai. And as always, I want to thank you, Ted, for coming in. Tedd Huff of Fintech Confidential. If you haven't seen the screen there in the picture, make sure to look him up. Interesting interviews, the human side of fintech, the people, the technologies, and the companies that are actually out there doing this stuff every day and coming back to tell us about it. So.
Yeah, so the next episode I have coming out on Fintech Confidential is going to be with the MX.com CEO, Jim McGatz. He's going to be on. We're going to be talking about data. Again, we're talking about data, lots of data, but how it's being used to innovate in the fintech areas. So I'm excited to be that. Bruce, again, thanks for having me on, man, and look forward to doing this next week.
Thanks, Ted. Have a great week. All the best.